Good Saturday evening. It is November the 11th, 2017. Welcome to this week's weekly weather briefing, where we are starting the video out with talking about some rain showers that are in our forecast for tomorrow, Sunday, November the 12th, and we might have some raindrops to dodge going into tomorrow. Now, we do have some fairly dry air at the surface at this moment, as of this recording, late Saturday night, and that dry air will prevent some raindrops from reaching the surface. You might pull up your radar late tonight, and it will show some green on the map, but I don't think any of that will be reaching the ground. Some of it will eventually start to reach the ground as the atmosphere becomes just a little bit more saturated going into the mid-morning hours on Sunday, but I do think that majority of tomorrow is going to be dry. But I think that if there is any raindrops, they're going to be very light. The NAM 3KM guidance, I think, is a little bit too bullish, which means that I think it's being a little bit too overdone with the amount of green that it's putting on the map for showers tomorrow. I think there will be a lot less green if you pulled up your radar at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, which is what this time frame is right here. Majority of our rain showers will fall between sunrise tomorrow and noon on Sunday afternoon. After that, it looks like we're just going to be dealing with clouds and some fairly cool temperatures in the lower to middle 50s. Our next system arrives on Wednesday, where we do have another cold front moving through. Not a lot of lift with this one, not anything as far as severe weather concerned, just some light showers, some light rain, a steady rain moving in for the day on Wednesday could help keep our temperatures down because of that. We'll have to watch that. And our next system after that arrives on Friday night, where we have a very strong area of low pressure forecasted by the GFS to our north, and that means we're in the warm sectors. So that means probably thunderstorms and maybe even severe weather. We do have some very tight isobars indicated here, these black lines indicating that we have some very strong winds at the surface that we're going to have to monitor, and we'll make sure that we'll have to keep an eye on that forecast for the hunters going into next weekend to see if we're going to have to dodge some raindrops going into Saturday morning. But right now, it looks like the bulk of this rain is going to come through during the night on Friday night, and our cold air will be arriving by the day on Saturday. The European guidance is showing some fairly big contours as far as the lift associated with this cold front next Friday night, which kind of concerns me. I do think that we're going to have to worry about some ingredients that will be there for severe weather, and I think that there is going to be some ingredients there that don't support severe weather. So there is going to be a mix of both. Right now, I think that we're leaning more towards the severe weather side of things, so I will have to monitor that very closely. Just monitor my Twitter account at JacobWoodsWX throughout the week to make sure that you are up to date on anything that comes in this upcoming weekend. Temperatures over the next 16 days are fairly cool and below average. Let's keep in mind that an average high temperature for this time of the year, and as the 16 days go on, it slowly begins to drop. But over the course of these 16 days, we really start out the beginning of it in around 60 degrees for an average high temperature. By the time you get towards around November the 26th, around Thanksgiving, an average high temperature is in the middle 50s. So we start to cool down once we go into the end of the 16-day forecast, but for the majority, we're pretty far below average. 50s and 40s for average high temperatures just about every single day, which is well below our average. Our normal low temperatures around this time of the year from the beginning, probably around the upper part of the 30s to lower 40s, and then by the time we get towards around Thanksgiving, we're usually in the lower to middle 30s, almost an average freeze just about every single morning. So I think that morning lows are just a little bit above, or rather below average, to around average, and then even some above average. We have a lot of cold fronts. Look, we have a lot of ups and downs. We go up on Sunday because of that cold front. We come down on Monday. We go up again for Tuesday and Wednesday. And the GFS is actually thinking that we still keep warming even after that cold front. The European thinks we cool down after the cold front on Wednesday and then warm back up by Friday ahead of that other cold front. I'm kind of leaning towards the GFS. I think that that cold front on Friday is going to be so strong of a system that it's going to begin to pull some very warm and moist air ahead of it as quick as Thursday. So I think that the cold front on Wednesday is just going to bring some rain, but as far as cool temperatures behind it, I think we're going to have to wait until we get towards around Saturday and Sunday, where we do have temperatures forecasted from the GEFS, the GFS ensembles, in the upper 40s to lower 50s. So there is some debate, and I think that we're going to lean more towards the cool side, but we'll talk about that cool snap coming in this upcoming weekend in just a moment. We see temperatures go up again for next Wednesday around the 22nd, and they come down once again. So a lot of cold fronts over the next 16 days. That means a lot to monitor. That means a lot of thunderstorm chances possibly. That also means that we also have a lot of rain forecast and a lot of an active pattern, which was forecast for the month of November, and that was the active pattern. So we look at the rain over at least the next week, and we're looking at really around a quarter inch to a half inch in portions of our area, but then there are some areas that will get above a half inch to maybe 3/4 of an inch, if this is correct. We do have a lot of thunderstorms to monitor for Friday's system, and as we know, thunderstorms can vary as far as rainfall totals from door to door. But the rains that coming in tomorrow and coming in on Wednesday are going to be a little bit more congealed, which means that, well, tomorrow on Sunday we're looking at spotty showers, but the Wednesday system is going to be fairly uniform. We're looking at probably around a quarter inch to a half inch of rain area wide with that event. So I think this is where a lot of that rain's coming from. And if we go ahead and keep looking further out, there is a lot of debate in the weather world right now about what is going to happen once we get around Thanksgiving. The GFS, which is what you're seeing right here, thinks we're warm. This does make sense with what it had on the 4th of November in the Bering Sea. We saw a very large ridge in the Bering Sea, which is right here where the mouse is circling. And we saw a lot of cold air at that time spilling into the western United States. Remember, we started off the month of November a little bit cool, but then we warmed up, and this was by the 4th. We did warm up. And we saw a ridge in portions of the eastern United States. But if we go to the European guidance, for the same time frame that you saw right here, it is showing some very, some large, at least, ridging across the upper parts of the atmosphere. So we're looking at a large ridge right here, which if we go by the Bering Sea rule, indicates a ridge going into the beginning of December. We also see some strong ridging all associated right in here, which this is a negative AO and a negative NAO. So we see a very big, when you see this C-shaped, that means cold air. When you have all the ridging in the upper parts of the atmosphere, the only place the cold air can go is south. And that's where it begins to become sourced, which means originated in parts of western Canada and central Canada. And when the cold, or at least the polar vortex, is centered in this part of the world, that usually means that it is going to not take hardly anything for that cold air to plunge southeastward into portions of the central and eastern United States, where the European has a very large trough around this time frame, around the 18th. So there is some debate between the GFS and the European model. The European thinks we get cold going into Thanksgiving, but the GFS thinks that we stay warm. So that's the debate for right now. We'll just have to watch that very closely as we go throughout the next couple of days. Another thing right here is that the coldest air, these are actual air temperatures in Celsius, and the coldest air for the most part is starting to become centered in portions of western and central Canada. And when we see the coldest air, some of the coldest air of the world, we also have some very cold air over here in Siberia. But we have probably the coldest temperatures right in here in the very center of the Arctic. But we have some very, very cold temperatures becoming, and you notice their origination right here, or their orientation rather is the word I'm looking for, pointing south and east, those very cold temperatures. So I think that there is a lot of cold air available. That's the key word, is available. This doesn't mean cold air is going to actually occur going into the next 11 to 15 days, but I think that there is some available. And here's our snowfall depth as of right now, and you notice how we have a lot of snow to work with in portions of the northwest, southwestern Canada, northern portions of the United States. We look at the same time last year, and nothing showed up except for the very high mountains up here in portions of the upper Rockies. So we have a lot of snow to work with, which is going to cool our temperatures. Any kind of cold snap that comes through here first cools those temperatures very rapidly, and then by the time that cold snap makes it into portions of our neck of the woods, it's very, very cold air. So the snow up here is just doing nothing but feeding the cold air, and it's causing a lot of that cold air to become sourced in portions of western Canada. And I think that if the cold air is sourced right there, if we see the coldest air of the world, mostly in portions of Canada, then we're looking at a very high chance of a lot of vulnerability with the polar vortex, which means it could really meander around a lot and try to come into our part of the country going into the second half of November. So let's keep that in mind. I think that was just a little bit of a brief to go into at least the second half of November and what I think it has in store. I think we have available cold air, But as far as temperatures actually going below average, we'll see a couple of below average times because of cold fronts moving through. But I do think that right now the ridge is going to become sourced right here in portions of the southwest and the southern plains. So it's also going to be ready to push northeastward whenever that cold gives it a little bit of a break. So there is a fight going on. I think the cold eventually wins out. I think the GFS is becoming a very bad model right now. The cold air that we saw this morning, we saw a low of 28, 29 degrees in western Kentucky. And if you were to look at the GFS model on what it was predicting a week ago for this weekend, it did not have anything even merely close to what we actually had this morning. So the GFS model is doing very poor, and I think it's going to continue to do very poor going into the next few months, and especially going into winter. Something to keep in mind, I think the European model is starting to hint at something that could be leading to a fairly cold outlook for our upcoming winter and a fairly cold second half of November.